Good morning from SFG Top Performance. We are excited to have everybody back again watching our show here. With us today, we have our regulars. We have Charles, Derrick, and Jason, and we have a pair of guests in Jay and Wes Sharp with Agritech Aviation. They're going to explain a little bit about flying on products for us. And with that, Jason, I'd like to have you take it over, please.
Here we have the third generation of the Sharps that have been in the aviation business and doing a tremendous job for us. And Jay and Wes Sharp, and they're going to talk a little about fungicides today and their specialty and the work they do and what they can offer us.
I'll kind of start off and kind of give everybody a little bit of family history on it. So the company was formed back in 1947 with a partnership between Chuck Laverty, who is a huge person in agriculture here in Central Iowa, was also a state senator as well. My grandfather got back from World War II and approached Chuck Laverty about the possibilities of getting into aerial application. A few weeks later, or a few months later, Chuck got a call from Henry Wallace Farms, and he had an insect problem and asked Chuck if he had availability or access to any aircraft to spray his field for this insect. So got a hold of our grandfather. He sent him down to Haiti, Missouri, and bought a retrofitted Stearman from World War II, one of the trainers, from a gentleman named Dick Reed, who's still selling airplanes down in South Central Florida or Missouri. Brought it back, and that was the start of, back then it was Laverty Sprayers. It was with our grandfather. In 1979, our father, Terry, got into the business, spraying for Chuck Laverty. And then in 1982, he came over to manage the aerial side of things for Chuck Laverty, and then worked as a chemical salesman the remainder of the year. And then in 1987, he purchased the business from Chuck Laverty. And Jay and I have been co-running the company together since about 2009. But we've grown up in the business. We've loaded airplanes, washed airplanes. We've done about everything you can possibly do. So here we sit in 2021. With Jay and I, we have 3 company pilots. All our company pilots are located here in Indianola, so they're local pilots, which we think's a great thing because, at the end of the year, our pilots, as well as Jay and I, really care about, the yields and what comes out of everybody's fields. So, when it comes to the application side, I'll pass it on to Jay on kind of how our company's set up today.
Yeah, so today our big business is fungicide. That's probably 80% of what we do in a year. Fungicide on corn and beans. That's the, July 10th or so it gets started, and we run for about a month. So it's a really important month for us, and we'd like to make the most of it and do everything we can and help you guys get product on for the growers. And the other aspects of our business are top dress urea. We do a little bit of that in May, June, early July, putting urea on corn. And the third and final thing we specialize in is cover crop, doing that in August, September, October.
A little earlier, we were talking, Jay, and you mentioned something about the fungicides and getting them on earlier and some of the new fungicides, being able to apply them.
Yep.
For timing, would you explain a little about the timing and how it works best and the best time to get it on with an airplane?
Yep. So most studies have shown through universities that about VT is an ideal application time for a fungicide. With the newer products, they're getting longer residuals out of them. So there's been a little bit more of a push to apply them earlier, just because we get so incredibly busy in the month of July. The companies that are making the surfactants have come out and said that they're comfortable with their products going on pre-tassel, which in the past, rest of air development was a concern with crop oil. All of the modern surfactants don't have an issue with that. So we have started doing some pre-tassel applications and still being able to use the fungicide, and yield results are just as good because we've got these these high quality fungicides with the 3 different ingredients in them mostly, and we're getting residuals that are going 40 plus days and protecting that corn plant deep into August that way.
And that's going to kind of help because it seems like the soybean application, the corn application have been overlapping more and more. It seemed like last year we were doing some really early soybean applications. So, if we can schedule it out to, get a little bit of a jump on some of that corn. So when the soybeans start rolling in, we're not just completely overwhelmed, that last week of July. We can kind of spread it out and, instead of trying to do everything in a 3.5 week window, we can spread it out to a 5-week window, which in the long run, it benefits everybody.
In our conversation earlier, we were talking about the benefits of an airplane and the pressure and ability of your pilots to do a tremendous job in the fields. Could you talk a little bit about the airplane and how it works and how you're able to do such a good job?
Sure. So the science of aerial application is we're using the air pressure that's coming off the wing to penetrate the crop canopy. Essentially what happens from a physical standpoint is the aircraft has to create a downforce off of its wing that is equal to the weight of the aircraft to maintain straight and level flight. So when our airplane is loaded, full of chemical, it is upwards of 9,000 pounds. And then when it's empty, we're down to about 4,000 pounds. So we're creating between 4,000 and 9,000 pounds of down pressure as we go across the crop. That's why we can go out and do 2-gallon acre work, because we don't need the water to push into the crop canopy like you would normally in a ground rig. You need to have your 10 to 20 gallons of water so you can push clear through. We're using the air pressure coming off the wing to penetrate through the canopy. And we've done a fair amount of studying where we put water sensitive cards deep into corn canopy. And we've seen, a fairly good amount of chemical penetration on the top and bottom sides of the leaves, clear down to the middle of the corn plant, and definitely to the ground, just not as much because you do have so much canopy there. There's always the question of airplanes versus helicopters. Obviously, we're very pro airplane. I can speak to the fact that our aircraft weigh more than a helicopter does, so we do get deeper penetration, better crop penetration. The helicopter, they come across feeling like you get better penetration because they're pushing down with the rotor, when in fact, when they're going straight and level across the field, they're not pushing down any more than the weight of their aircraft, and they don't weigh as much. So it's a bit of a myth for helicopters doing a better job. They definitely do a good job in certain parts of the state and certain fields, but on our normal sized corn and bean fields in Iowa, the airplane can penetrate just as well, better than, and more efficiently than helicopters can. So,
and in our neighborhood, we only have, I think there's 2. There might be more than 2, but there's only a couple actual helicopter operators here in the state of Iowa. All the other helicopter operators are from Texas, Louisiana, Florida, some other states. So, most of Iowa applicators are primarily fixed wing with maybe a helicopter in the mix to help out in some situations. But all the big helicopter operators are all out of state. So, especially in southern Iowa. We're local pilots. We live here. We love seeing, Iowa agriculture thrive. So we like being that partner with Smith and the grower.
I can vouch for the fact that they have tremendous applicators, by far superior to many in the business. So I will vouch for that fact. And I have another question here: is when it comes time for your fungicides for planning for customers, what you want to know? I want my fungicide spray today, or what do you want for planning from us and from the customer? And what can we do to help you be more efficient and get around to get it done so it's getting the best benefit for all of us?
I mean, as much communication as possible is always key. The more we know ahead of time, the better we can plan for it. So if you as agronomists are out and you've got growers that are interested or wanting to do it, passing some of that information on to us so we know what to expect when, July 15th hits and we're not completely blindsided. And then we've got our program that we use with Smiths to upload the maps and that way we can see what's going on, but even some communication ahead of that saying, we've got X coming and something to be ready for is really the most important thing, just maintaining communication.
Yeah. This corn's probably going to be ready in 4 days. That way Jay can start scheduling it. He knows it's coming up. So when the corn actually is ready to task on that day 4, you guys call up and say, hey, we're ready for an airplane. That airplane can be there that afternoon or the next day, ready to go to take care of those acres. And then even ahead of that, if we can have a general idea kind of how many acres you're looking at, because, we do contract in a couple pilots to help us out when we get really slammed. We've been working with these pilots for a number of years. Their airplanes are set up identical to ours. But if we can forecast that ahead of time, so we're not caught in a pinch where, all of a sudden we're backed up 4 or 5 days and we're trying to find an extra plane of pilots come in and help us out. If we can work with our ag retailers to where, we know kind of an idea what's going to happen in the coming weeks, then we have all the equipment and then everything ready here to give you guys the outstanding service that you guys have always come to expect from us.
Derrick, is there anything guys can be doing right now to prepare for their fungicides in the summertime as far as the seed and whatnot? Is there anything we could do to be preparing for it? So when it comes to these guys, we're ready to go.
You bet, there sure is. So right now is a really good time to keep an eye on what hybrid that you're planting, and you want to know where you're putting all the hybrids, because we always take a really good look at the response to fungicide scores. And in the summer, that takes a lot of the guesswork out of which field to go after to spray fungicide on. We don't like to always just make the blind approach of spray every corn acre every year. We like to really identify which fields need it with disease pressure out of there, or which ones need it because they have a high response to fungicide. There's some hybrids out there that even if it's a dry year and there's no disease, it just has those plant health benefits that really shine when fungicide's put on it. We just need to keep an eye on where we're putting those hybrids when we start planting here. Planting's right around the corner. We try to do that when we deliver seed out, either write it down on a book or put it on a sticker of what field that 6357 is going on, or something along those lines. We also get a lot of questions from customers that time of year about airplane coverage next to tree lines, next to timbers, kind of the weird shaped fields. And I asked the question on the call this morning, and can you guys go into kind of how close can you get to fields that have tree lines right next to them, or how, if there's a corner that you can't all the way get into, I mean, is it 200 foot? Is it 500 foot in that corner you can't get into, or kind of what are the width capabilities for the boom and that sort of stuff?
Yep. So the wing of the aircraft is a little over 50 foot wide. The way the product comes out, it fans out to about 70 foot. So we've actually got an extra 10 foot on either side of the aircraft that we're getting product out. So we can go along a tree line parallel to it and get right up to the edge. If it's a field that's a little trickier, that we don't have the ability to get down and go parallel to that, then we will fly towards the trees and then make a gradual pull up as we approach them. And that gradual pull up is increasing the G load on the wing, creating even more lift than we would if we were in straight and level flight. So we do have the ability to push the product as we're pulling out of a field. Big 100-foot trees, we're not going to be able to push it clear into the corners on that. We'll do what we can. There's, depending on the weather, sometimes you got a wind at your back that helps push it farther in. So the pilots take all of those things into consideration: temperature, wind, terrain, and the trees around them. And they do everything they can to make sure they cover every bit of the field. If we do get into a situation where there's really tall trees or there's power lines that they can't work around, they will mark off that part of the field and say, this was not something I could cover. So if you booked 80 acres and you had an obstacle there that they couldn't get around, they're just going to mark it down. That was an acre, or that was 2 acres that I couldn't cover, and we don't bill for it. And we do that as well for drift issues. So if we're flying around an area that's got some houses along it and the wind isn't favoring a close application of that, the pilots will leave off, a pass or 2 around those sensitive areas, and they mark that right on the map saying, I couldn't get 3 acres over here covered because there were a house with a playground in it, and didn't want to get too close to the neighbors there. So they'll just knock off those few acres, and that way the farmer gets what he pays for, and we can still feel comfortable about doing the best we did on the part that we could do.
And the size of the aircraft kind of matters in a lot of those situations. The aircraft behind us is a 400-gallon aircraft. All of our entire fleet is 402s, 400-gallon aircraft. So imagine going 140 miles an hour and you're in a 6,000-pound airplane. You got to pull up at a certain time. Well, if you go up to a larger aircraft, whether it's a 602 or an 802, you're increasing the weight of that aircraft. So you have to increase where you're going to be pulling up. So, we're starting to see a lot of larger aircrafts in our territory, but, when it comes to getting into the corners, the smaller aircrafts do a better job getting in, and then that comes back to the helicopters. Well, a helicopter can get into the corners and tighter spots better. They can to a sense, but they still got to pull up and go over that obstacle. They're not going into that corner and turning in the field. They still have to pull up and go over those obstacles just as much as the aircraft, and they're not creating as much lift. So they're going at a slower speed, yes. So, when it comes down to getting into the corners, I think our aircrafts can do just as good of a job with the helicopters and a much better job than the larger aircraft that we're starting to see in our neighborhood.
Charles or Mark, do you have any questions for him here?
Well, this has been great listening to this. The information you're giving us, I've heard some before, and we're getting new information from you. What you're capable of doing is wonderful for us and for our growers, and I appreciate very much what you're saying here today.
One thing that we do not like to do is what's called hot loading. And it's kind of happened more and more. And this is where, again, we work really well with Smith Fertilizer and Grain. So our crew's set up to go to the closest airport and work from there. The Smiths will bring us the water, and that's it. At that point in time, we own all the product that's on our trucks. We mix each load by hand. We don't use pumps or anything because the calibration of the pumps can kind of get off. So we measure out everything. We have 5-gallon calibration jugs and 1-gallon jugs. So our guys do a really good job to make sure we're putting in exactly how many acres we need in that aircraft at all times. With fungicide, we're doing 2-gallon work. So we have a flow control on the aircraft that goes based on the speed. So, if we're going into a field and we have a headwind of, 7 miles an hour, that airplane, essentially airspeed is going 7 miles an hour to be slower. So we're going to have to close the valve of that flow control, similar to what's on the ground rig sprayers. So it tightens that up, allows us to put out as close to 2 gallons as possible. We're typically within 5/1000ths of a gallon. It's a really close percentage on our target. And then again, when you turn around and you're going into the field, now you have a tailwind. Well, now you're going 7 miles per hour faster than your target. So essentially you're going 14 miles faster one way than the other way. And that's based on airspeed, not ground speed. And that's all through the GPS and everything. So if you can imagine, you're going into the field and, there's let's say 0.2 of a difference with the 7 mile per hour wind. Well, if you're going back and forth, all of a sudden now you're at 0.4. So you're close to half a gallon difference between a headwind and a tailwind. And what that flow control does is it allows us to put out 2 gallons, no matter what the wind speed is, airspeed. So we're always putting out 2 gallons, and it's a really cool technology. It's something we try to embrace all the technology possible, just like you guys do in your planning equipment and everything else. I mean, it's becoming a technology game more than a farming game almost anymore in this entire business.
Well, this has been great listening. This is wonderful information for our growers and for our employees as well. We want to thank you very much for spending time with us today. Jay, Wes, Agritech, your business is phenomenal. It's been helping Smith Fertilizer and Grain for years, and it's been helping our customers the same way. We certainly look forward to having you as a partner in agriculture over the years to come, and we'll continue to be getting you orders in so that you can help service as needed. I want to thank everyone for attending today, for listening to our podcast today. I want to thank you for the business you've provided us over the years. I want to thank you for the business in the future.